Welcome to the Creepy Horror Stories channel. Tonight, we bring you a chilling tale of biological terror titled Genetic Plagiarism. What happens when your own blood turns against you to revive a nightmare from the past? Sit back, turn off the lights, and enjoy the show. The mail arrived at Elia's suburban home just like any other Tuesday. He sat at his granite kitchen island, sipping lukewarm coffee and tearing open the heavy envelope from GeneLink Systems. He'd expected a colorful map of Europe, or perhaps a surprising percentage of Scandinavian heritage. Instead, the single sheet of paper inside was stark. There was no family tree, no list of distant cousins in Ohio or cousins in Ireland. Under the heading Primary Genetic Match, the report listed only one entry: Subject 1888.
What the hell is Subject 1888? I paid $80 for a glitch.
Confusion turned into a restless obsession. Elias spent the next 6 hours hunched over his laptop, digging through digitized historical archives and obscure forensic databases. He finally struck a lead in an old academic journal regarding Victorian-era cold cases. Subject 1888 wasn't a clerical error. It was the classification given to the remains of Thomas More, a notorious serial killer from the late 1800s. Moore's body had been exhumed in secret decades ago by a private research group interested in the biology of evil. The records stated Moore was a master tanner by trade who'd systematically dismantled his victims with the precision of a craftsman. The next morning, Elias walked into his kitchen and stopped dead. Sitting in the center of the table was a tarnished silver brooch. It was rusted, the pin bent at an awkward angle, and a single dull red stone sat in its center. He recognized it instantly from the crime scene sketches he'd seen online the night before. It was the exact piece of jewelry stolen from Moore's first victim, Mary Ann Thorne, in the fall of 1883.
This isn't funny. Sarah, if you're messing with me, it's not working.
He called his sister twice, but she didn't pick up. He lived alone, yet the house felt crowded. Elias wiped his sweaty palms on his jeans and pulled up the security app for his home cameras on his phone. He rewound the footage of the kitchen to 3 a.m. The table was empty. He accelerated the playback. At 3:14 a.m., the digital image flickered with heavy static and white noise. When the digital noise cleared a second later, the brooch was simply there, resting on the wood as if it had always existed. There was no intruder, no door opening, and no shadow.
It's a prank. A high-tech prank. Someone hacked the feed and broke in.
He tried to convince himself, but his own body began to betray his logic. While typing a report for his accounting firm, Elias felt a sharp, stinging sensation in his hands. He turned his palms upward and felt his breath hitch. His skin was thickening. Rough, yellowish calluses were forming across his fingertips and the sides of his thumbs. The kind of friction burns and hardened skin one gets from pulling heavy leather thread for 14 hours a day. Small, jagged white scars, some appearing like old knife slips, began to etch themselves across his knuckles. He hadn't touched a blade or a piece of hide in his life, yet his hands now looked like they belonged to a man who had spent 40 years in a Victorian slaughterhouse.
I'm losing my mind. This is just stress. It's just a psychosomatic reaction.
He rubbed the new scars, but they were deep and permanent. He was 5 feet, 11 inches tall, and 170 pounds of soft office worker. But when he looked at his hands, he saw the tools of a killer. The air in the master bathroom was thick and humid when Elias stepped inside that evening. Resting on the edge of the porcelain tub was a wet silk handkerchief. It was stained with dark, rust-colored smears that hadn't yet dried. As he reached for it, a sudden, suffocating scent filled the room. A heavy mix of coal smoke, rotting Thames water, and horse manure. It was the atmospheric stench of 1880s London, localized entirely within his modern American bathroom.
This can't be real. It's just a smell. It's just a piece of fabric.
His phone buzzed violently on the counter. It was an urgent notification from the GeneLink Systems portal. He opened the encrypted message and felt his stomach drop. The lab's automated update stated that his recent sample was showing unprecedented kinetic mutation. His original DNA markers were being systematically overwritten. It wasn't a disease. It was an invasion. His very genetic code was being replaced, sequence by sequence, by the predatory blueprint of Subject 1888. A heavy, authoritative knock thundered against his front door, shaking the frame. Elias looked through the side window and saw two police cruisers with their lights flashing, casting blue and red shadows across his lawn.
Elias Thorne. This is the police. We have a search warrant for these premises. Open up now.
What? What did I do? I've been home all day.
We found your prints, kid. Or at least, prints that match a profile we just got from a federal database. They're all over a crime scene on the other side of town. A woman was found in an alleyway an hour ago. She was carved up like a piece of livestock.
Elias backed away from the door, his heart hammering against his ribs. He retreated into the hallway, tripping over a loose floorboard. As he scrambled up, a rhythmic, metallic scratching sound echoed from behind the drywall. It sounded like a rat, but more deliberate. He grabbed a heavy decorative vase and smashed it against the plaster, tearing a hole in the wall. Tucked inside the insulation was a leather roll. He unfurled it to find a set of Victorian surgical scalpels and bone saws. They weren't cold like ancient relics. The steel was warm, pulsing with a faint, rhythmic heat as if they'd just been pulled from a sterilizer.
I didn't put these here. I don't even own a hammer.
The world suddenly tilted. The sound of the police breaking down his front door faded into a dull hum, and the light in the hallway turned to a gray, a sickly mist. When Elias finally blinked his eyes open, he wasn't in his hallway anymore. He was standing 3 miles away, under a flickering streetlight in a park he'd never visited. His expensive fleece jacket and designer jeans were gone. Instead, he was wearing a heavy, wool frock coat that smelled of dampness and a pair of stiff, leather boots covered in industrial soot. The clothes were oversized for his frame, but they felt terrifyingly familiar to his touch.
How did I get here? Where are my clothes? Where is my life?
He reached into the deep pocket of the coat and felt his fingers brush against cold, sharp steel. He looked down at his hands, seeing the thick, scarred calluses of the tanner glowing under the dim yellow light. He'd lost 4 hours of his life, and in their place, something else had begun to take a walk. Desperate and trembling in his ill-fitting wool coat, Elias tracked down Dr. Eris Thorne, a disgraced historian living in a cramped apartment filled with rotting parchment. The old man didn't look up from his desk as Elias entered, his eyes fixed on a sketch of the Subject 1888 remains.
You have his gait, Elias. The way you lean to the left to compensate for the weight of a heavy medical bag. Thomas Moore wasn't just a murderer. He was a pioneer of what he called blood memory. He believed the soul was a sequence that could be recorded in the marrow. He didn't just kill those women. He harvested them to fuel a ritual that would allow his essence to hibernate in his bloodline until the technology was ready to wake him up. You aren't his descendant, son. You're his cocoon.
Elias fled back to his house, locking every deadbolt. He stumbled into the bathroom to splash cold water on his face. But as he leaned over the sink, he froze. In the mirror, his reflection didn't mimic his movements. While Elias stood paralyzed with his hands gripping the porcelain, the man in the glass was calmly preoccupied. The reflection was reaching out of frame, meticulously sharpening a long, curved flaying knife on a leather strap. The twin in the mirror looked up, his eyes dark and ancient, and offered a slow, jagged smile that Elias didn't command.
Get out of my head. This is my body. Stop it.
He ran into the living room, but the familiar world was dissolving. His 65-inch OLED TV was gone, replaced by a heavy oak sideboard topped with flickering tallow candles. His ergonomic sofa had morphed into a stiff, velvet settee that smelled of mothballs and stale tobacco. Even the drywall seemed to be peeling away to reveal soot-stained brick and rotting timber. His smartphone, lying on a wooden crate that used to be his coffee table, flickered once and turned into a heavy brass pocket watch. A faint, metallic smell, copper and salt, wafted from his bedroom. Elias walked toward his walk-in closet, his boots clicking on floorboards that were now rough-hewn and uneven. He pulled open the door. Slumped among his remaining hanging shirts was a young woman in a bright yellow yoga outfit. The contrast was sickening. Her modern clothes were soaked in blood, and her torso had been opened with the surgical precision of a master tanner. The subject 1888 signature was unmistakable.
I didn't do this. I was at the park. I couldn't have. I'm not a monster.
The weight of the atrocity crushed him. He couldn't live as a vessel for a century-old nightmare. Elias grabbed a shard of broken glass from the floor, his hand shaking as he pressed the jagged edge against his own throat. He closed his eyes and lunged to slit his jugular, but his arm locked midair. An invisible force, surging from deep within his own muscles, snapped his wrist back with a sickening. His own hand turned the glass away, dropping it to the floor. No matter how hard he tried to jump from the window or choke himself, his nervous system overrode his will. His body belonged to the DNA now, and the DNA had a biological priority to survive until the transition was complete.
Please. Just let me die.
His own mouth opened, but the voice that came out was deep, raspy, and carried the sharp edge of a London fog.
Not yet, boy. We have so much work left to finish in this bright new century.
Elias stumbled out of the front door of his apartment complex, gasping for air that was no longer clean. The paved parking lot was dissolving into slick, uneven cobblestones coated in a film of black sludge. Modern SUVs and sedans flickered like dying light bulbs, replaced by the skeletal silhouettes of handsome cabs and wooden carts. The high-pitched hum of the city's power lines was gone, replaced by the oppressive silence of a fog so thick it felt like wet wool against his skin. His suburban street had become a labyrinth of narrow, filth-ridden alleys where the only light came from the dim, flickering orange of gas lamps.
Where is the road? Where are the lights? This isn't California.
A black sedan, the only modern thing left, screeched to a halt 10 feet away. 3 men in expensive, tailored suits stepped out, but they didn't look like police. They knelt on the muddy stones, their eyes filled with a terrifying, religious fervor.
The sequence is almost complete. Jin Link didn't just find you. Ilias. We cultivated you. We needed a perfect biological printer to manifest the master's architecture. Your flesh is the ink, and his blood is the script.
Elias tried to scream for help, to tell them they were insane, but the words wouldn't form. When he opened his mouth, his vocal cords felt thick and scarred. The panicked American vowels were gone, replaced by a harsh, guttural rasp from the docks of East London. He looked at a nearby neon sign that was fading into a wooden tavern board. But the letters were gibberish to him. The Latin alphabet of his own life had become an alien code. He could no longer process the symbols of the 21st century. His mind was being scrubbed clean of everything Elias Thorne had ever learned.
Bleeding L. What's happening to me head? I can't see the words right.
He retreated back into what remained of his kitchen, tripping over a pile of rotting straw that had replaced his linoleum floor. On the rough wooden table lay his blue American passport. It was the final anchor to his existence. As he reached for it with hands that were now permanently stained with the grease and salt of a tanner, the edges of the document began to curl and blacken. There was no fire, just a slow, genetic erasure. The photo of the smiling office worker faded into a blank gray square, and the paper turned to ash between his scarred fingers. Elias Thorne was dead. The man who stood up from the table was 2 inches shorter, his shoulders hunched from years of labor in the pits, and his eyes held a cold, predatory intelligence that hadn't been seen since 1888. He reached into the shadows of the sideboard and pulled out a long, thin scalpel. The steel felt like an extension of his own nerves.
A whole world of him. Thousands upon thousands, living like sheep in their glass towers.
Thomas Moore walked to the window and looked out. The fog of old London was receding, but the city he saw was no longer his enemy. He saw a sprawling, interconnected hive of millions, all tracked by the very technology that had brought him back. He didn't need to hide in the shadows of White-Capelle anymore. In a world of 8 billion people, a ghost with a blade could feast forever. He stepped out into the neon glow of the modern night, the scalpel hidden up his wool sleeve, ready to begin his second act. Thank you for listening until the very end. This was an original story written exclusively for this channel. Now, I have to ask you, if you found out your DNA was being rewritten by a historical monster, would you fight it until the end? Or would you accept your fate like Elias? Let us know in the comments below. If this story gave you the chills, please hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on all notifications so you never miss our next descent into darkness. Don't forget to check out our other videos for more nightmares. Stay safe, and remember, some secrets are better left buried in the marrow. Goodbye for now.